Welcome to the Truckers Network radio show on tncradio.live, where we offer the news, weather, traffic, information, and entertainment our drivers want and need. I'm your host, Shelley Johnson. Our drivers are becoming more keenly aware of taking care of their health, and they're working hard to do that. February is National Heart Disease Month. Heart disease is the leading cause of deaths in the United States, and sadly, many drivers are at risk. With us today is Julie Dillon, the Health and Wellness Manager for St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund. She's got tips and information our drivers need to hear about in terms of heart health. Welcome, Julie. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure to always be here and be able to talk with you.
I love chatting with you. You're a wealth of information, and this is so helpful to our drivers. Heart disease, I know it's always in the headlines. How serious is it? It sounds like it really is a problem across North America.
It is, and it wasn't always that way. And that's what is so extremely sad. According to some statistics out there, and there are different results depending on where you go to look and find your studies. But according to some of the CDC's information, that 1 in 4 deaths are actually occurring as a result directly of heart disease.
Wow. That's high.
Cardiovascular disease.
I'm seeing that deaths actually from heart disease fell between 1950 and 2009, but it's going the other way now. I wonder why.
Yeah, well, isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
We saw a lot of heart disease and things prior to around 1950. And that is when Harry Truman, the president at that time, he came up with some studies and some things that he wanted to do to stop this. And he created this, think tank, so to speak. And, it's now the National Heart and Lung Institute. It has become as a result of that. And they started doing these studies and they found things that affect the heart. And it's funny, when I was reading about this, it says they were so uninformed and naive at the time that on the list of things that they had ordered for this group when they had gotten together to discuss all this, they had ashtrays on the list.
Okay.
And because they just didn't know. It wasn't known back then what smoking can do to your heart and to your health.
Right.
And so I thought that was really kind of ironic. But when they came out with these studies and they saw what different variables, as far as, different things, looking at, what we eat and what we participate in and, smoking and different things like that, they saw a decline. People really got on board. And about 2009, things really started changing. And we saw a big uptick in heart disease related deaths. So it's been climbing ever since then. It actually fell, though, during those years from 1950 to 2009, it fell 69%.
I know, it's substantial. So I'm wondering what the heck's going on that it would start going back up between 2010 and 2020, when people are more aware of what to eat and how to live and trying to change their lifestyles and that sort of thing.
Well, believe it or not, one of the main reasons is because younger and midlife adults are dying more from heart disease now than they ever did.
Okay.
Yeah, and it used to be, an old person's disease, so to speak. Old is that term, I use that term relatively. But but old people typically is what they would consider having heart disease, and or dying of old age. And I'm sitting here thinking, you can't see me. I have little quotation marks going up in the air with old age, but it's not an old person's disease or an old age disease anymore. We have a friend and a coworker that comes on, a colleague rather, that helps us sometimes in some of our other programs with St. Christopher Fund, and she's a cardiac nurse. And she says that they see people in their teens now coming in with heart-related diseases that need help, either with, maybe having a bypass or having to have a stent put in or different things like that.
Wow. Ugh, that's absolutely scary. Now, is it the rise in obesity in children and teenagers and that sort of thing?
according to what she has shared with me, and she's actually, like I said, a cardiac nurse down in Chattanooga, Tennessee.
Hmm.
And she said what they're seeing a huge um, uptake in young adults is living a very sedentary lifestyle.
Okay. Yeah.
And you talked about the rise of that and as a whole, which we can get into that more as well. But as far as the younger people, it's their lifestyles have become so sedentary because they go to school, they sit all day. They come home, they get on and they play video games
Yeah.
or look at their phones
Yeah.
and play Candy Crush or whatever it happens to be. They watch TV, they sit and eat fast food or whatever happens to be, or something, frozen, like a frozen pizza or whatever they can grab, and they eat while they're watching TV, looking at their phones, or playing video games. And then they go to bed and they get up and do it all over again the next day.
Sure. Humans
So,
were not designed to sit.
no, we are not. It puts huge strain on our lower back and on our hips. And we're just not made to do that. We're made to move, and we
Hmm.
don't move anymore like we used to. And I think that's one of the big reasons that 1950 to 2009, people were moving more. People
Hmm.
were outside more. People didn't have cell phones that they could at their fingertips and information at their fingertips where they never had to go and do anything. It's so easy. And I'm not throwing stones here. I am speaking to myself as much. It is so easy to pick up your phone and think, oh, I'm going to look at something specific.
Sure.
And the next thing you know, you've been on Facebook for 40 minutes because one thing leads you to another and leads you to another. And you go down these different rabbit trails
Hmm.
and you don't even realize it. An hour's gone by.
Oh, and they're good at leading us down those rabbit holes too. The way they set it up. It keeps you on social media.
Oh my gosh, yes, I am bad for that. I have learned that I have to just put my phone away for a while and not look at it at all. And,
Hmm.
too, over the past 20 years, maybe 50, maybe 15, computers have really made a huge difference as far as being able to sit all day long and work at a computer. That wasn't
Yeah.
always the case. And so I think that's another reason. And granted, I'm not a doctor, so I am not, I don't claim to be one for sure. But these are just some things that I have studied and researched. And, if you sit in front of a computer all day, it's just like sitting behind the wheel of a truck all day as far as getting no movement in.
Hmm. It's
Now, I
true.
realize those are two very different jobs. So, and I'm not making light of either of those. But when you sit no matter what you're doing.
Yes, and I had read, oh, a long time ago that the more you sit, the more prostaglandins or something that you develop in your body, which can add to pain. And I think it starts in the gluteus maximus or the buttocks.
I have not heard about that. I will have to look into that. That is very interesting.
Yeah, I don't know why I remember that little stat, but and I thought that kind of makes sense. But yeah, in terms of sedentary, we have become far more so. It makes absolute sense. You've got I in my own neighborhood, I don't see the kids outside that much. You
No,
know,
and it used to not be that way. It didn't. I mean, I know I may be aging myself here when I say this, but I can remember when we came home in the afternoons, if it wasn't freezing cold, it was like go outside, find something to do outside. And we were outside all afternoon
yeah,
and
yeah,
evening. And the way we knew to come home, is we'd hear somebody outside yelling for us to come home.
sure. Well, and
And we
the
played
parents
together
wanted it
and
that way. They wanted you to get out and work off that energy, and they got a break too, you know.
absolutely.
Uh,
And I don't think that happens as much anymore. One, I don't think parents feel like it's as safe to do
Yes.
that
Hmm.
now.
Hmm.
And so they can't just let their kids run the neighborhood like we did once upon a time. And it probably wasn't extremely safe back then either. We just didn't hear about everything like we hear now.
True. That adds to stress too, doesn't it? We're always hearing bad news. Uh,
Yes, yes. So turn off the news, get what you need to get and be done
exactly. Yeah,
because
because that
it
just
is
adds to
stressful.
stress, which is not good for the heart.
Amen. That's
Hmm.
right. Stress
Hmm.
is definitely can make you sick.
Yes, it can.
And I could talk a whole session on that on itself.
Oh, yeah. And we are stressed today, no doubt about it. But I find interesting before we go to break, between 21 and 2022, heart disease deaths jumped to 21%. Wow. For people between the ages of 45 and 64. People definitely in that period of time between 2021 and 2022, we had the pandemic lockdowns. People were definitely forced into being more sedentary, I think.
They were, and it was a
Mhm.
very stressful time. And even though I feel like it's become a four-letter word, even though it's a five-letter word, uh, COVID definitely took its toll on people. Now, I'm not saying that COVID caused a lot of heart attacks, but just the pandemic itself and the stress of not knowing what was coming next
Yeah.
and becoming more sedentary and being on these lockdowns and for goodness sakes, if you're a driver and you were having to deal with it out there, I mean, you were running yourself to death or not having a place to go to the bathroom or being locked
Mhm.
out of places. I mean, it was just incredible, and that's massive amounts of stress.
Really is. We have to go to break here, Julie, but I want to really delve into the different types of heart disease, what drivers can do to lower
Hmm.
their risk, and how they can take care of themselves, because that's so very important. We're talking with Julie Dillon. She's the Health and Wellness Manager for St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. The Truckers Network helps professional drivers save money and makes their lives easier. We were created for drivers by a commercial driver. We know the industry and driver needs. A Truckers Network membership offers exclusive discounts through our trusted partners on things like truck care, truck parking, tires, oil changes, fuel additives, fitness, roadside assistance, first aid kits, driver training, and a whole lot more. Start saving today. Check us out at app.thetruckersnetwork.net. That's app.thetruckersnetwork.net. The trucking industry keeps America running thanks to the 3.36 million professional truck drivers who deliver everyday goods to 80% of American communities who rely on trucking for that last mile. The industry represents a diverse group with nearly half of drivers at 42% as minorities. Trucking Moves America Forward, or TMAF, educates the public on the essentiality of trucking by telling the story of trucking and its positive impact on our economy, communities, and lives. Learn how you can join the industry movement by visiting truckingmovesamerica.com. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. I'm your host, Shelley Johnson. We're talking about heart health with Julie Dillon, who's the Health and Wellness Manager for St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund. Julie, I'm seeing here that there are different types of heart disease. Thought maybe we could cover a little of that for the drivers to get familiar.
Yes, thank you so much. I would love to do that. So there are three common types of heart disease that we see on a consistent basis at St. Christopher Fund. And that is one of the big reasons that I wanted to talk about this is because we see a lot of heart disease. That is actually our number one thing that we see as far as applicants are concerned. And whether it be, or when I say that, I should say cardiovascular disease as a whole. So that includes strokes as well. But the three main things that we're talking about as far as heart disease are going to be heart attacks, coronary artery disease, and congestive heart failure. And what a heart attack itself, what actually happens is that your blood flow to the heart is interrupted and it causes damage to the heart muscle. And then also, then if you just a little add on there is that if someone has a stroke, what happens is they can have an artery or something, blood flow going to the brain is blocked, and they end up having a stroke. So, and it could be that a blood clot comes in there and blocks it, or plaque artery and buildup blocks it, and so you have a heart attack. And like I said, it damages your heart muscle. And that is probably one of the most common things we see. We see a lot of heart attacks, not just in men either. It's in women as well.
Right? Can people have a heart attack and not know it?
Absolutely, they can. Typically, that is more common in men, that men will see they really won't have any symptoms, and they may see a doctor or something, and all of a sudden they realize they've had a heart attack. Uh, it does happen in women, and it's not as common in women, but it is more deadly in women. And I honestly do not know the answer as to why that's the case, but I do know that it is more deadly in women than it is in men if you don't have any symptoms.
And the symptoms are different with women.
They are. They are typically women don't experience the same thing as men. Like women may feel like they have a tightening in their jaw, and it may hurt in their jaw more so. And men typically don't see that as much. A lot of times, someone actually just feels sick. You feel like almost like a reflux kind of thing, and you just feel sick, and like you may start to throw up or something,
Mm-hmm.
and that can be a symptom that you would not associate with a heart attack. So, and of course, there are your classic symptoms. The feeling like you have an elephant on your chest, feeling like you can't breathe because it's so heavy on your chest. That's typically going to be the biggie right there that most people recognize. But a lot of times that doesn't happen that way, and people don't realize they're having a heart attack.
Now, there's a difference between a heart attack and a cardiac arrest, isn't there?
Yes, cardiac arrest is when the heart actually stops beating. I mean, it's full blown. You can have a heart attack, and some people have them and never know it, and that they'll go in for something else, and they'll do an EKG, and they realize they've had a heart attack. But cardiac arrest is the heart actually stops, and it is, if you don't get something done right then, death is imminent.
Yeah. Well, and the reason that came to my mind, and this was discussed after the football player was injured,
Right.
and that cardiac arrest, no doubt, was because of what had happened on the field, and
Mm-hmm.
scary
It's,
stuff.
it
Just a
is. It's
sudden.
usually results from an electrical disturbance in the
Okay.
heart.
Okay.
And like I said, you have to get help immediately when something like that happens.
Mm-hmm.
If you have had a cardiac arrest and you've survived, more than likely it's because someone has done CPR of some sort.
Mm-hmm.
And I am sure that there is someone out here listening that has happened to them, because it happens more often than we realize. I know I have talked to drivers that have, had financial assistance with us, and, for whatever um, reason that there may be something else totally going on with them, but they'll talk about how they've gone into full cardiac arrest and end up needing to be resuscitated. So it's pretty serious stuff. And unfortunately, it is all too common, not only in the trucking industry, but in America as a whole.
Wow, that's scary. You've got coronary artery disease as well as heart rhythm issues and congestive heart failure. These are all heart disease issues, and all of it sounds terrible. But uh, is it preventable? I would assume that there are steps we can take, short of having, if you have a congenital type issue where it's something that's hereditary. A lot of this people can gain control of. Am I correct on that?
There are some things that you can't control, and there are many, many things that you can control. With coronary artery disease, and you'll see people talk about, they have CAD a lot,
Mm-hmm.
just that little acronym there. It's basically when your arteries become diseased and they can't adequately move the blood through the body like it should be. You need blood and, and oxygen and nutrients that are going put through your body. And when the arteries start to get clogged up and they build up with plaque, then things can't flow like it's supposed to. It's kind of like, if you ever seen a PVC pipe or opened up an old, copper pipe or something, and you see all that sludge and stuff that's in it, and the hole just is getting smaller and
Mm-hmm.
smaller, and stuff can't go through.
The water
That's
pipes in
what
my
our arteries
house.
can look like.
The water pipes in my house, I've had the pleasure of looking at some of those due to no a water softener that wasn't used. It's like, oh my goodness, how's the water even getting through there? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's what our arteries can actually begin to look like if we don't take care of ourselves, really. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We have to start putting ourselves first when it comes to our health. And so when what happens is, a lot of times those arteries get completely clogged up, and guess what happens? We have a heart attack. So we have to make sure that we're taking care of our bodies, taking care of our arteries. And there are things that we can do. There are things that we can do on the front end to keep that from happening. And, a little bit, I just don't want to keep talking about the morbid stuff, like congestive heart failure. And that's where the heart it's just losing its ability to pump like it should. And so things don't circulate the way they should. And things, blood and things build up, blood and liquids and things build up in the body because it
Mm-hmm.
just can't move like it needs to. And, sometimes if you have one of these diagnoses, you don't ever get to return to driving. And because with a congestive heart failure, you actually have to meet a certain percentage. And I'm almost positive it's 40%. You have something called an ejection fraction, and it needs to be, pumping at least 40% to drive. And if you can't meet that, then you're disqualified from driving. And because typically, sometimes people can get that back up, but the majority of the time, once it's there, it's there.
Sometimes people actually have to have devices in, like a defibrillator and a pacemaker to bring it back to where it needs to be. Am I correct on that?
Well, to keep that if it starts to if there's so many beats, if it gets below so many beats a minute,
Mm-hmm.
yes, you can get a defibrillator put in that will shock you
Mm-hmm.
to, well, actually the pacemaker is what will keep it from getting too low, but then a defibrillator will shock you if it's getting out of rhythm. And that's an
Okay.
electrical issue too. And
Right.
that falls under cardiovascular diseases. And I mean, hallelujah for modern medicine. I
Oh,
think our
yeah.
death rate would be a whole lot higher if we did not have the modern medicine that we have where people can do
Sure.
things like that, where if you have to take a cholesterol medicine, you can. If you need a pacemaker, you can get one. If you need a defibrillator, you can get one. Those things didn't exist a long time ago.
No, they didn't.
Um, and so we are very fortunate that we live when we do in the age that we do and that we can have those things available to us and stents put in. That's been a game changer,
Mm-hmm.
being able to have a little stent put in that keeps those arteries open so that they don't collapse and clog up again.
And then their heart rhythm issues. That's more of an electrical issue. Am I correct?
It is. It is. It's just where the heart gets out of rhythm. What it's
Mm-hmm.
called atrial fibrillation, and it just doesn't work correctly, and it may jump all over the place and doesn't stay in a correct rhythm, and therefore it doesn't allow the blood to circulate like it needs to as well. So that's another thing that's not necessarily considered heart disease, but it is in that realm of cardiovascular disease.
But it can cause all kinds of problems. Can it cause clotting and all kinds of stuff that can develop?
It
And
can.
yeah.
It definitely can. It can cause blood clots, and so then people end up having to go on a blood thinner. A lot of times they'll go on something like warfarin or
Mhm.
Eliquis, and then you have to look at, oh, what can I eat that's healthy? Because there's certain things you can't eat when you're on blood thinners.
Yep. Very true. Because certain foods will thin your blood.
Well, you people that are on blood thinners have to be really careful with eating green leafy things because it can mess them up. Yeah,
Interesting. Uh, what are the biggest offenders of the green leafy things when people are on blood thinners?
it's the vitamin K. Vitamin
Okay.
K has a clotting factor in it as well, and so
Okay.
you have to be careful with that.
Okay. I don't think everybody knows that. I'm
Don't
not
quote me
sure.
on that because
Okay.
I don't have everything right in front of me.
Hmm.
But you just have to be careful if you're on a blood thinner. And typically, any doctor that puts you on blood thinners, they will tell you that.
Right. What to avoid, all of the above. Sure.
Right.
Well, I know that if you're on statins for cholesterol, I think grapefruit is something you have to avoid.
Yeah. Now I'm not familiar with that one. I haven't heard that.
I may not be correct on that, but I'd heard that. And I'm not sure exactly what the interaction is there, but if it cancels, one cancels the other out or what the heck it is. But
Yeah, I'm really not sure. And I
mhm.
did just as we were talking, I did look it up and was like, okay, good. I wanted to make sure I didn't say the wrong thing. It is due to vitamin K. And
Okay.
it's because of the clotting factor. Vitamin K is what helps the body, clotting. Like if you're bleeding and you need it, you need your blood to clot, or something like that. And so it's a good thing, but if your blood is already too thick and you're having to be on medication for that, you definitely don't want to be eating a whole bunch of leafy greens, which in normal circumstances are extremely helpful, but in this case, it's not. So.
Interesting.
That's what the deal is with that.
There's so many elements in all of this. It's so complicated, but that's why we wanted to have you on so you could explain some of this. And it makes it less scary too, if people kind of understand how everything works.
Well, it can be scary. And if you have ever experienced, you know, coronary artery disease, or for goodness sakes, if you've ever had a heart attack, you're darn right it's scary. And I haven't experienced it. I have walked through it with some family members, and I know how scared they were and how scared it made me. But the good news is there are things that we can do, and that's what I want to be able to share with drivers. We
That's right.
have some risk factors and we can talk about those, but I definitely want to spend some time on what you can do. It's not all doom and gloom.
Which is excellent. And that's what everybody wants to hear. What we need to do is, I think, probably cover that in our next segment because we have to go to break here. And I don't want to have to
Okay.
interrupt you because this is valuable information for our drivers. We're talking with Julie Dillon. She's the Health and Wellness Manager for St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund. We're talking about heart health, how you can stay healthy, how you can prevent heart disease. That's the objective here. So you don't ever have to encounter things like coronary artery disease or heart attacks. You're listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on TNCRadio.live. Stay tuned for more coming up. TNCRadio.live is proud to carry the Steve Summers Overnight Drive Show. TNCRadio.live is dedicated to commercial drivers. We offer the news, traffic, and weather you need, and the entertainment, sports, talk, music, and celebrity interviews you want to hear 24/7. We have original shows and trucker podcasts that feature some of your favorites, like Ice Road Alex Demogorski and America's Truckin' Sweetheart Marcia Campbell. TNCRadio.live is convenient and designed for professional drivers. The best part is we're free, and you can listen anywhere you are on the road. With just one tap, you can tune into Steve Summers and us right on your phone. Simply download our app by going to app.tncradio.live. That's app.tncradio.live. Welcome back to the Truckers Network radio show on TNCRadio.live. I'm your host, Shelley Johnson, and I'm talking about heart health with Julie Dillon. She's the Health and Wellness Manager for St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund. Julie, there are risk factors for heart disease. You said you wanted to kind of go over that.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So there are some risk factors. Some of them we can control, and some of them we can't control. So if you have a family history of heart attacks, that's not necessarily something you can control. There is a little bit of a genetic component to heart disease, but it's not the main component. So that's what we need to keep in mind. There are lots of things in our lives that may have a little bit of hereditary component, but that doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. So that could be something you need to think about. Obviously, age is going to play a difference. That's going to be a risk factor. I know we talked earlier about how that age keeps getting younger, but the older you get, the more at risk you're going to be, just because your body has been on this earth longer, and it's going to take some time to build up some of those things that we've been talking about. Plaque in the arteries doesn't happen overnight, and so it takes time for that. So it's going to be age is going to be one of them. Stress is a huge one. If we are unable to learn, well, anyone can learn it. It's whether we choose to use the things that we learn, but managing stress is going to be key also to helping with keeping healthy overall, and because it can make you sick and it does contribute to heart disease. Just stress on our bodies, because stress causes other things such as inflammation and things like that in our bodies, and that fight or flight's always on when we're under stress.
Sure.
So that's going to be another risk factor. If you know that you are under a lot of stress on a consistent basis and you haven't been taught techniques to manage stress effectively, it can take its toll on your heart. And there are several other things as far as do you smoke? Do you have diabetes? What do you eat? What does your lifestyle look like? So a lot of those are lifestyle factors. How much do you um, take time to get out and move around some? That's huge, huge for the body. So there are lots of things that are risk factors, but if you notice, the majority of those things I mentioned, we have some control over.
which is good. And I would imagine people have to be brutally honest with themselves and say, okay, these are some things I need to look at. Um, just by sitting all the time, drivers are more at risk because there's no movement. So that makes them a higher risk. With their food choices, if they don't necessarily carry food on their truck, they have to go to fast food restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
They may be exposed to more sodium and things that probably aren't so good for their heart.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is very, very true. And I'm hopeful that now that we have um, gone through the worst of the pandemic and we seem to be starting to come out on the other side, that more restaurants and things that are going to be more readily available to drivers um, will be opening back up and they can have better variety or a greater variety and food choices to be out there. I know we have been really advocating with some of the fuel stops about offering healthier choices in the fuel stops because everything on those little grills or those little turning grills and things like that, those are not going to be your choices and your best choices. And and fresh fruit and things like that only last so long. And
Sure.
unfortunately, fuel stops are going to provide one, things that have a long shelf life, or two, things that they think the drivers want. And until we make the shift, start asking or demanding, however you want to put it, for healthier options, it may not happen. But we have been working with some of the stops on, what can we do to get some healthier options in the fuel stops for drivers.
Oh, it's so important. Absolutely. Because you can't carry everything on the truck. And
No.
certainly that adds to the stress of drivers. Um, they get plenty of stress just with their everyday jobs out on the freeway, dealing with the unpredictability of not only weather, but the motorists that they deal with. So, everything that we can do to make them a lower risk for any kind of cardiovascular disease, it's a good thing. Now, there are things we can do about all of this, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. You mentioned cooking on your truck or having the ability to store things in your truck. I would say, and I know that everyone can't do this, and I understand that, but if at all possible, that is probably the most important, if not one of the top two most important things you can do as a driver is to be able to have a refrigerator or at least some kind of portable cooler that keeps things warm. I mean, keeps things cold. Sorry about that for a while. Or a little freezer and something like a microwave or a little convection toaster oven or something along those lines where you can do some cooking in the truck. I can't stress that enough. And because that is the ideal best way to be able to have healthy foods. And I realize it's not possible. Not all companies will provide that for drivers. But if there's any way that a driver can do that, that's where you want to start because you know, there are so many things that you can do and eat healthier and store things for the week, especially if you get home on the weekends. Spending an hour or two preparing some meals ahead of time is going to be one, less expensive, and two, much healthier for your body. So trying to cook in the truck, even if you just start out doing, one time a day or something like that and building up, you're going to be setting yourself up for better success.
Mm-hmm. So it takes a little bit of effort. In addition to being better for you, probably save money too.
It does save money because it costs a lot of money to be able to eat out so many times a day, unless you choose the really crappy stuff that's at some of the fast food places that's on the couple dollar menu, and you do that enough, and you're definitely going to have some clogged arteries, unfortunately.
Mhm.
And I
Not to
hate that,
mention
but
mystery meat. I mean, if it's really, really cheap and it tastes different, maybe it's not good for you.
that's right. That is exactly right. But
Uh,
some of the things that you can eat that are going to be healthier for you, and these are things that you can get and pop in a little refrigerator or different things like that, and have these as snacks and stuff instead of that big giant bag of chips. You can always do fruits. Fruits are and in moderation. You want to eat a couple things of fruit a day, not 10 or 12, because then you're getting up there and lots of sugar, even though you do have some fiber in there with it. Anything ending in berry is going to be your best bet. Your strawberries, raspberries, um, blueberries, blackberries. I try to have blueberries almost every day because they are just have so many good things loaded in there for you. And then like we talked about earlier, your green leafy vegetables, and unless you have an issue with Coumadin or some sort of blood thinner, then your green leafy vegetables are going to be top of the line as far as being healthy options. I tell everyone to try to eat the rainbow, and what I mean by that is the more colors that you get on your plate or on with your meal and different things, the better off you're going to be, because different colored vegetables and fruits have different nutrients. So to be able to get the most of what your body needs, because that's what we're doing, we're fueling our bodies with what we're putting in it. And you got to decide if you're going to fuel it with good stuff or if you're going to fuel it with a bunch of crap.
right?
And so with that being said, right, I hope I wasn't a little too blunt there on that one, but you want to eat the rainbow so that because carrots may provide different nutrients than a radish or than a red pepper, but broccoli may provide something totally different than a beet. And
Hmm.
I'm just throwing some different things out there. So it's good to eat as many different colors as you can when you're having a salad or a meal or anything else.
And some other tips are like don't overeat, drink alcohol in moderation,
Yes,
try to reduce
that's
blood
important
pressure.
too.
Yeah, and get your diabetes under control if you have that. All of those things are super important too.
Absolutely. What happens with drinking, people think, well, what's drinking? How can that affect your heart? Drinking alcohol regularly actually raises your blood pressure over time. And high blood pressure is one of the precursors to having a heart attack or having some sort of heart disease
Okay.
if you have it long enough and it's uncontrolled. So that's why I always say drink alcohol in moderation.
Hmm.
Take action to do the things we're talking about, to work on getting your blood pressure, or if you have diabetes, making sure you keep that under control. And because that's what we want to do, we want to control some of these things and get ahead of it for sure.
Sure.
And if you smoke, please quit. We can help you with that with our Rigs Without Cigs tobacco cessation program. That is actually the leading cause of preventable death in the United States, and people don't really think about that because they think, well, I use it to help. The biggest thing I hear is it helps de-stress me. I like to smoke when I'm stressed, and I totally get that. And what we can do is help you come up with alternative things to do to manage that stress and be able to put down the cigarettes.
And that program's Rigs Without Cigs, you said?
Correct. Rigs Without Cigs. It's on our website at truckersfund.org.
Okay. Great. And managing stress, obviously, that's something that drivers really need to do on a regular basis. And God bless them that they can get out there and deal with the kind of stress they do. Um, how do they manage stress in a healthy way?
Well, what happens is when our bodies experience stress, we have something called the fight or flight syndrome, and our sympathetic nervous system kicks in. And, that's important. We need that. We need that because let's say, when you're in a situation and you're a driver and you're driving down the road and you see a car on fire and you pull over real quick and you help get that family out of the fire, you need that fight or flight to kick in.
Yep.
And because that's what helps save people's lives and can actually save your own life. The problem is when we deal with chronic stress, our body doesn't understand that it doesn't need to stay in fight or flight, and it gets stuck there. And so that cortisol is pouring in all the time, and we get stuck in fight or flight and we don't realize it. And so
Hmm.
we think, oh, we got to have something to manage the stress. And that's, where smoking comes in, or, different ways of managing. People do different things to deal with that stress. But what we need to do is work on bringing our stress levels down naturally. My go-to thing, which I promise you, it works, it works, it works. It sounds so cliche and so simple, but it works. And that is literally deep breathing. Start out very simple. Deep breathe in for a count of 4 seconds, and then breathe back out slowly for a count of 4 seconds. And that's all it takes. And you focus on that counting. Your brain can't be doing several things at once. And if you will actually focus on counting while you're taking in that slow, deep breath, and then counting back out, to 4, slow, deep breath. If you do that for about a minute or so, which is about 7 or 8 times, then you'll see your heart rate go down. You'll see your blood pressure drop a little bit. You'll see, brain activity will start to calm down, and you'll slowly start to de-stress. And when you learn to use these techniques, or techniques like this, instead of reaching for something else, you can manage your stress a little better. That's the fastest, easiest one I can tell you about to de-stress is deep breathing. There's tons of science behind it, how well it works.
Good point, and good advice. And it's something you can do anywhere. Doesn't require any special equipment. So that's a good thing.
Absolutely, it doesn't. It does not at all. One thing I did want to throw out here for you, Shelley, that drivers can actually look at. I realize that a lot of people don't like to go do a lot of preventative stuff out there, but there is something called a coronary calcium scan. Are you familiar with that? A lot of people aren't.
I'm not. No.
Well, I actually learned this from my cardiac nurse friend I was telling you about. So it's called a coronary calcium scan, and it's basically a specialized X-ray test that provides pictures of your heart that can help your doctor detect and measure the calcium containing plaque in your arteries. Because a lot of what you have in your arteries is calcium, that plaque that builds up. And it can detect that through these little, it takes hundreds of little X-ray pictures. And it's similar to when you get in this machine, it's similar to like if someone's ever had a CT scan, but it's actually just X-rays doing a calcium scan, and you can do it preventative. It costs about $100. It's not something that's covered by insurance, but it will measure if you have plaque in your arteries leading to your heart. And it's something that you can do preventative health-wise to check to see, where am I with all of that? And, what do I need to work on? And so, just so you have an idea up front. I went and had one done because I thought I can't be telling people about these and having these done if I haven't done it myself. And so I did go have one done myself, and, found out what kind of plaque I might have in my arteries as well. It's very simple. Took me about 10 minutes. The biggest thing is taking time to make the appointment and go in and have it done. Any doctor or any primary care physician can order it for you. You do not have to actually have, something terrible going on to have it done. They can order that as a preventative health test.
Interesting. Well, this is really important to know. So this is something that drivers can do when they go see their doctor for their annual checkup.
Well, I think it's pretty cool that you can actually go and measure the amount of plaque that might already be in your artery so that you know what your risk factors are there.
That's right.
So I thought it was really an awesome thing to be able to do.
That is very cool. So now, where do people reach out to St. Christopher Truckers Relief Fund? Because I'm sure that there are going to be some drivers who might have some questions.
Sure, they can go to our website at truckersfund.org, and you'll see the health and wellness tab there, and all our programs and blog articles and things like that are all listed there. They can contact me, Julie, at truckersfund.org, or they can call me on my work cell phone, which is 865-544-8145.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing all of this information on how to prevent heart disease. This is so important. I really appreciate it, Julie.
Thank you for having me on, and hopefully this reach someone out there that can make a difference with them.
That's right. If we reach just one person, it's worth it. Absolutely.
That's right.
Thank you so much. You've been listening to the Truckers Network radio show here on tncradio.live. Stay tuned for more great information and entertainment coming up on the station. Thank you for listening to another great interview on TNCRadio.live and the Truckers Network Radio Show. All of the material you hear on TNCRadio.live on our website, our broadcasts, or our podcasts are copyrighted. There can be no distribution without the express consent of TNCRadio.live and its partners. For inquiries, write us at info@tncradio.live. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast of the Truckers Network Radio Show.